Okay, colleagues, greetings and welcome back. Εντάξει συνάδελφοι, γεια σας και καλημέρα. So, we're going to continue the reading of the wonderful article by Adrian Johnston from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. Couple things I want to say before we jump right into the text. First of all, thank you so much for everybody who has been keeping in touch. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions, feel free to write them, in the YouTube comments. Or again, one good way to talk to me directly is through my Telegram. My Telegram is here. You can see the link on the screen. It's find it below in the comments. It's just basically my name, Alexander Koryagin. Anyway, so the comments were good, the questions were good. Some people have already given a lot of feedback, and just in general, if not regarding Lacan, but if you have any questions whatsoever, I'm always happy to take feedback or to take questions. Also. So this is I'm enjoying the reading. This is work. This is good work, productive work. We're gonna do a Q&A session, I think, probably this week. I'm ideally I want to do a Q&A session every week. This week, hoping to do a Q&A session on Lacan. And in general, after reading this article, there's a couple of other things I want to read about Lacan out loud here on the channel. And actually, I'm also reading a couple of books on my own about Lacan. I'm not sure I should tell you the names, partly because I'm not sure I want to recommend them, because I'm not sure if they're all that good. Ideally, I'd want to do a lecture on Lacan. We'll see how it goes. This is basically a productivity stream. You can see to some extent my work in progress. It's not just that, it's also a little bit of exercise in YouTube streaming, exercise in live speech. So, but among other things, it helps me organize my thoughts. Yes. So actually, it's like I want to talk about myself and why I'm doing the stream, but I also want to talk about Lacan. So we're gonna read today the chapter is on the mirror stage, the famous mirror stage. Although again, for me personally, the three register theory, the imaginary, the real, and the symbolic, this is most important in Lacan. But mirror stage is also fairly important. But before we proceed, let me say a couple words. Again, my comments on Lacan. So let me start somewhere. Maybe let me. So again, when we talk about the symbolic, the imaginary, and the real, we talk about this structure or the symbolic, right? The symbolic, and this idea that the unconscious is structured like a language. The unconscious is structured like a language. And we have seen, right, that there's a langage in France, there's also langue, and there's also parole. And Lacan specifically uses the word langage, which has this connotation of a syntactic system. So a syntactic structure, structure or system. And I didn't really explain that at all. This is one of the drawbacks of doing live streams. Sometimes it's difficult to think on the fly. I didn't explain that at all, but and I'm not gonna really do it justice right now. But let's have a preliminary explanation, right? So the structuralist idea of people like Saussure, and then later of people like Claude Lévi-Strauss, who applies Saussurean, linguistic insights to culture in general, is that the idea, again, for Saussure, language is first and foremost a system of signs. So this is Saussure versus, let's say, somebody like Aristotle. Saussure versus Aristotle, right? So for Aristotle, language, or just I'm using Aristotle here as a synecdoche, yes, as a synecdoche for the whole range of traditional views about language. So the idea that, again, language, words refer to things. So for Aristotle, words refer to things. Words refer to things, right? And Saussure is going to say, no, words refer to other words. Words refer, if you want to say in some sense, only to other words. Signs refer to signs. So an idea familiar to you, maybe from somebody like Jean Baudrillard, this notion that of a simulacrum, this notion that there's a sign without a referent, that on the end of the sign there's just more signs. This is a complicated thought. I think I'm going to leave it here now. For many of you, this explanation will be enough. For others, you will have a lot of questions, but again, this is work in progress. I'm not exactly sure if this is the best time to explain. And again, as I told you, I think that this characteristic way of doing philosophy, as engaging with history of philosophy, if you're coming from completely from the outside and you're looking at, this statement that words or signs refer only to other signs, this sounds bizarre, this sounds strange. But if you look at the history of philosophy from people like Plato and maybe somebody like, Descartes or Kant, very importantly Hegel, and people like Freud to some extent, let's use Heidegger, right? If you look at this whole history of philosophy of all of these names, this doesn't sound as strange, right? There's a certain element, there's a certain notion that human thinking is self-referential. Again, Plato would talk about these, shadows on the walls of the cave. Plato would talk about, what's the word I'm looking for? How we're trapped, how a pedestrian consciousness is trapped in the world of appearances. And that there's a world beyond speech. And again, I think Lacan has this very nice phrase, if I can, it's not Lacan's phrase, but yeah, we're talking about so how the real is not reality, but the real is the kind of true reality behind what people mistake for reality. This imaginary and symbolic, imaginary first-person sense data and symbolic language. So reality, which is beyond, the real, hence, is whatever is beyond, behind, or beneath the imaginary phenomena of accessible to consciousness and beyond language. So the real, Plotinus is also trying to do that. What Lacan is trying to do that, and what philosophers have been trying to do since the time of Plato and Plotinus, is to break through to the real reality, to the fundamental ontological reality behind the imaginary appearances and the symbolic language. So let me write this. So Lacan, like Plotinus before him, tries to break through to the fundamental reality, to the fundamental real, behind, beyond, beneath the imaginary appearances, imaginary illusory appearances, and also behind, beneath, or beyond language, beyond the symbolic language, right? That behind words there's this deeper reality. However, I just said a second ago that Lacan again takes his cue from people like Saussure and Lévi-Strauss. So again, Saussure talks about how words or signs refer only to other words, and then Lévi-Strauss is going to say that kind of culture itself is a system of signs, and that kind of cultural phenomena only refer to other cultural phenomena. That sort of for Saussure, language is a closed system. Well, I'm exaggerating, and I'm gonna talk about the exaggeration in a bit, because of course attentive students would say, well, what do you mean language is a closed system? Isn't there a certain way in which language hooks onto reality? Yes, but when you talk about language hooking onto reality, that's also a linguistic operation. That's also a linguistic operation. Language, quote unquote, hooks on to quote unquote reality, but you have to understand that the word reality is just a word. The sign reality is just a sign. And Lévi-Strauss is going to say that culture is a closed system. When I say closed, self-referential, what's the word I'm looking for? Semiotic system. Semiotic, meaning it's made of signs, closed semiotic system. And then, to kind of clarify this a bit more, what I said a second ago, reality is just a word, it is just a sign. Okay? And this is kind of the fundamental problem, the fundamental predicament, right? And here, kind of, it's a delicate balance. So we have a delicate balance. Somebody like Derrida, and by the way, I have to say, you know, I really love Lacan, and I enjoy Lacan tremendously, and I have immense respect for Lacan, for Foucault, for, you know, Althusser. Derrida, my relationship is more complicated. I respect Derrida, but my relation to Derrida is much more of a love-hate. And I feel like somebody like Derrida flips too much on the side of this kind of closed self-referential system. You know, Derrida is going to say, you know, il n'y a pas d'hors texte, right? Il n'y a pas, there's nothing outside the text. Il n'y a pas d'hors texte. I hope I'm spelling this correctly. Probably with an H here. So this is what Derrida is going to say. And, you know, does Derrida really mean it? No, I don't think he means it quite that way. Because obviously we postulate the existence of some, you know, it's like, as a vanishing, I mean, in the previous segment of this article by Adrian Johnston, we talked about how there's this vanishing point. Of course, reality exists as this vanishing point. You know, think of Immanuel Kant. It's important. So okay, double checking in Google. It's supposed to be like this, or text like this. There's nothing outside the text. It's a crude translation into English, right? Of course, kind of reality exists as this vanishing point, but I want to say, kind of, it's important to keep the balance. Like, of course, this real fundamental reality is not accessible in a straightforward way. Think back to Plato, think back to Plotinus, think back to Immanuel Kant, right? We do not have unproblematic access to the noumena, to the noumenal world, to the things as they are in themselves, right? We do not have an unproblematic access. But at the same time, we have to talk about reality. And kind of, I think, when I talk about this delicate balance, I think Derrida is too reluctant. So Derrida, for my taste, is too reluctant to talk about this vanishing point of reality, the vanishing noumenal point of, quote unquote, the real. And in this sense, I like Lacan much more, because with Lacan, I feel that he makes it rigorous, he makes it precise. You know, Lacan is you know, for me, is fine. He strikes the balance. He finds the balance. He strikes the golden mean. He strikes the golden mean between, you know, dogmatism and how, you know, Anglo-American philosophy is going to talk about, of course there's reality, you know, George Edward Moore, here's a hand. Dogma, you know, of somebody like Moore, Moore's hand. And for me, I'm sorry, you know, with all due respect, completely unacceptable position. I was never a big fan of George Edward Moore. And you know, golden mean between dogmatism of Moore and kind of, you know, just and complete I don't know, kind of up in the air relativistic skepticism, and complete, let's say, apophatic let me write this, apophatic skeptical silence. That, you know, you're not gonna talk about reality at all. I think Lacan kind of finds the right formula. And again, for him, like, I think Derrida is too much on this apophatic side, but Lacan is, for me, on the golden mean. And kind of, again, to oversimplify and to summarize, for me, kind of, this delicate balance should work like this. We postulate the existence of reality. We postulate the existence of this vanishing point, noumenal point, But at the same time, we recognize the problematic mediated nature of our access to it. And when I say mediated nature, specifically mediated by imaginary appearances, mediated by the imaginary, yes, imaginary, and by the symbolic. And imaginary is fraught with illusions. Right? So imaginary in this sense has to be taken with a grain. So I mean, like, so you need to kind of fight against these illusions. And the symbolic is also fraught with illusions. But the symbolic is this, is this structure. Symbolic is a structure, semiotic structure with a logic of its own. And so, kind of, you constantly need to be vigilant. So, constant vigilance. And we have to understand, kind of, our view of reality is going to be polluted by these systems of the imaginary and the symbolic that Lacan, alerts our attention to. Okay? This is a postscriptum to the previous section. On the three registers, the real, the imaginary, and the symbolic. Okay. So, I wanted to start reading, but you see, kind of, these digressions take time, but these are important digressions. This is work in progress, and I hope these are useful clarifications. So, the next thing I want to talk about, and this is, again, a big topic, I'm going to try to be brief. So I'm not really an expert in psychoanalysis. I'm not really an expert in Lacan. So, and I do not want to sound disrespectful, right? So I have huge respect for Lacan. But for my taste, when I look at psychoanalytic literature, again, I've never been an analysand of Lacan himself, and it's like this may be unfair to Lacan. This may be due to people misdescribing what Lacan is doing. But for my taste, the psychoanalytic therapy strikes me as insufficient. There's too much talking. And very often I find kind of psychoanalytic examples, I find them a bit too, how should I put this, a bit too, kind of, they have this literary quality. They sound too good. They sound like a story which sounds too good. Again, a story which sounds too good. So it's like you have these, again, I saw in a book about Lacan a couple of these examples, like there's a girl who has trouble with her father, and she has this dream in which she hides in a library among bodies of people, and then a sinister stranger comes in to try to murder her, and she stabs him with a pen, right? And the psychoanalytic explanation is that, she wrote a letter to her father, in which she expressed her anger, right? She wanted to stab him with this letter, as if she's stabbing him with a pen, right? And the library is that she escapes into books from her father, and the bodies in the library are her promiscuous sexual contacts, right? And this is a story which sounds way too good. And it's like, is this credible? In principle, it could be, but again, how can we be sure that this is a real story and not just a psychoanalyst? Because, psychoanalysis alerts us to the egocentrism and the narcissism of human psyche. How do we know that this is a real story and not just, an analyst's expression of analyst's narcissism and them spinning a story which sounds just too credible and too good? Right? Or when we talk about things such as autism, right? So I'm talking about psychoanalysis, philosophy versus clinical therapy. So autism is another example, right? So we're going to talk about mirror stage, hopefully, in a moment, right? This idea that people become autistic because there's something wrong in their development, like their mother did not treat them well enough. And it's like, I'm not sure if that's true. Again, I'm the first person to criticize Anglo-American psychoanalytic and in general psychological tradition. I feel, and I'm going to talk about CBT in a second, cognitive behavioral therapy. I think in Anglo-American tradition, there's too much this kind of emphasis. Let's get people back into shape. Again, this capitalist, capitalist. Let me write this. Capitalist character of Anglo-American psychotherapy. Anglo-American psychotherapy. This notion of let's get people back into shape. Let's cure people, which is to say, make them a productive member of society once again. Make them a functioning cog once again. Right? Once again, or for the first time, right? And hey, cog, sorry. And again, I'm skeptical of that. I'm suspicious of that. But at the same time, again, psychoanalytic story at times sounds a bit too good. So kind of what I'm trying to say is that I think psychoanalysis has very deep and very important insights. So I respect psychoanalysis. I think it has deep philosophical insights. But at this stage of my thinking, psychoanalysis needs to be supplemented. Psychoanalysis needs to be supplemented. Supplemented by what? Well, let me tell you what. The model which I like best at this particular moment in time, again, take it with a grain of salt. This is my evolving understanding, is CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. And very often I hear this notion that CBT somehow is antithetical to psychoanalysis, that CBT somehow is anti-psychoanalysis, and that's just completely not my understanding. So for me, CBT is this biopsychosocial model. So you have biological problems, right? And sometimes autism, or in many cases, there's reason to believe that autism is simply a physiological problem in the brain. And so it's just straight up physiology. Can you do something to it by talking, by therapy, by again this kind of talking psychotherapy? Well, maybe you can alleviate some symptoms, but to imagine that you can rewire your brain just by talking, that sounds to me a bit too what's the right phrase? A bit too ambitious, right? So it's like if you broke your arm, Jupiter forbid, but if you broke your arm, you don't expect psychotherapy to be able to help you, to be able to cure you completely. Maybe I mean, yes, psychotherapy is maybe helpful, and it sure is, right? So it's like insult to injury, right? So I think either Sextus Empiricus talks about this, or maybe this is my kind of association with Sextus Empiricus, is that, again, if you broke your arm and you also experience feelings of shame and guilt, this makes the curing process harder, right? This exacerbates the trauma. So in addition to the physical trauma of your arm being broken, you're also distressed. So, and in this sense, psychotherapy can help you alleviate your symptoms and make sure that your arm is cured faster. Yes, and I don't deny that. But that's, psychotherapy is here working with a psychological problem, with a psychological aspect of a broken arm. And so to this extent, again, I want to say, if somebody is suffering from autism, there's a physiological problem, and on top of it, or in addition to it, there's also a problem which is treatable by psychotherapy. But I wouldn't expect psychotherapy to go all the way. And when I say here, again, biopsychosocial model. So on the one hand, maybe you need a medical intervention, pharmaceutical intervention, or maybe surgical intervention, although, of course, the history of lobotomy is extremely tragic and gruesome, but, difficult topic. I mean, in principle, it could be that some surgical interventions are beneficial. Anyway, so medical intervention, or you talk about, it's like, for me, let me just abbreviate yoga, because, for me, this is something I keep coming back to. so many of our psychological problems, I feel, especially from my own experience, can be solved or at least made better through some form of physical exercise. Like I woke up this morning, and before I recorded this, I did a short, yoga session. I went for a short run, like jogging run around the neighborhood here, and I just feel so much better, right? And this is what psychotherapy, this is what psychoanalysis is supposed to be for. Again, this is what Freud says: replace neurotic misery by ordinary human unhappiness. And I felt okay this morning, but so I was very low on the scale of misery, but I've gotten better, not because I did psychoanalysis, but just because I exercised my body a little bit, right? And not to mention that, again, so in addition to yoga, maybe even kind of yoga or maybe pranayama, breathing techniques or meditation, it's like I feel it's very important to pay attention to the body. And honestly, again, maybe I'm reading the wrong psychoanalytic literature, but I feel there's not nearly enough attention to the body. Again, this notion that you can talk to an individual and solve their problems, to me, that sounds deeply insufficient. So again, I'm very respectful of psychoanalysis. I think it's good and it's helpful, but it needs to be supplemented. So by, again, biology, again, so and also by the social elements. Something, again, I don't want to talk about too much, but again, if you over intellectualism of psychoanalysis, yeah. So the biopsychosocial model of CBT versus over intellectualism of psychoanalysis, right? So this last thing about the biopsychosocial model, social is very important because sometimes you find yourself in environments or in society, cognitive behavioral, therapy. You find yourself in an environment, society that is, deeply dysfunctional, right? And I mean, should I insert Marx here? Well, with a question mark, Marx. Sometimes our problems are because we live in a bourgeois society, and maybe you can, move out, downshift, or engage in revolutionary struggle, revolutionary organization. I've heard a Marxist talk recently about how thinking, that's ideas, but organization, that's material struggle. And we have to remember that Marx is a materialist, but organization, social organization, especially labor organization, has this material capacity to it, right? So again, again, talk about me. I'm not the, it's like I'm not the happiest person alive. Again, it's like trying to improve my mental health. Part of what I'm trying to do is psychoanalysis, but also part is yoga and meditation and just in general physical exercise. But also part of it is social, moving between countries and also engaging in, this is not exactly revolutionary organization on my part here, what I'm doing here now. But this is my part of being engaged in a community. I'm doing these live streams, and people are writing back to me, and it's like I'm engaged in these conversations, and this helps because I'm doing something meaningful with my life. This Hegelian Aristotelian element, Aristotelian zoon politikon, be a member, a functional member of society, and that's helpful. That's helpful at times. And I don't think that's. I don't think that should be discounted. Oh, by the way, this is an excellent opportunity. Say hi to Nikolai. Nikolai, thank you so much for dropping by. Again, well, sorry, I'm kind of all over the place. Let's continue with Lacan. But I deeply appreciate the company, and for me that has to be part of the solution. I've also wanted to say a little bit about this imminent criterion delayed gratification, and this for me, again, I'm not going to talk about this now. Just a note for future time. This is Nietzsche's stage of the camel, and I absolutely cannot type this time of day. Stage of the camel, and or Hegel's. Master and slave dialectic, Knechtschaft, Hegel's slave dialectic. So basically, when I talk about this delayed gratification, I'm talking about self-discipline. So, or in the words of Rousseau, this obedience to the law that one has prescribed to oneself. And again, this is a big topic, but just and there are many things I want to stress, but especially kind of this notion of kind of retraining, even almost Pavlovian retraining that a human being is a bundle of habits. Humans are bundles of habits, right? And from again, like less talk and more retraining. So and like in CBT, what we have is a conscious deliberate effort to retrain yourself. Conscious deliberate effort to change habits of behavior, of mind, of thinking, of thought, habits of behavior, and habits of the body. Right? This is why I like CBT. Again, habits of behavior, habits of thought, habits of the body. And again, the problem with psychoanalysis for me, psychoanalytic tendency to kind of too much focus on talking, too much focus on talking. And again, I don't want to discard psychoanalytic insights. I think it's very important, again, because like basically what we're trying to do, I feel, is a paradigm shift. It's a Kuhnian, it's like what we're trying to do is akin to a Kuhnian paradigm shift. And yes, kind of talking can be important in that. In that regard, you kind of sit on a couch, you talk to your psychotherapist, you say certain things out loud, and the psychotherapist gives you a certain way of looking at these things, and you can have a moment of breakthrough. So in this sense, I think psychoanalysis is good and right, on the right track, but it might be insufficient, because the insight that you gain on the chair, kind of in the psychoanalytic couch, you stand up, you walk out of the room, and you lose it. You lose it because people are bundles of habits, and unless you make it stick, psychoanalysis is good for the insight, but you also need CBT to make the insight stick. This is my short summary. PA is good for, so PA psychoanalysis is good for a breakthrough in insight. But again, at this stage of my life, I'd say you need CBT to make it stick, to kind of retrain, change habits of, again, thoughts and behavior. And again, it's like, I understand very well that that CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, is a child of the capitalist system, okay? And CBT is a tool. It can be used for good. It can be used for detriment, right? Kind of, it can be used to enslave people more efficiently to the capitalist system. So I'm not saying that CBT is sufficient without psychoanalysis, but kind of so kind of, I guess I would start, it's like, if my suggestion would be to start with psychoanalysis, but then use the insights and the techniques of CBT to help and to improve. But again, like in general, I am in this sense, my own approach is syncretism. Take your syncretism. Take your insights from wherever you can. Take whatever works, right? So kind of epistemic anarchism. It's like Nietzsche, excellent. Buddha, excellent. Socrates, wonderful. Sextus Empiricus, yes. The Stoics, even better. Lacan, throw in some Lacan, CBT. Let's not forget Marx, etc., etc., etc. And I think in engaging in productive dialogues with all these traditions, this is for me the best way to, in the words of Sigmund Freud, to replace neurotic misery with ordinary human unhappiness. Okay, this actually, how long have I been going for? 34 minutes. I should rename this. Yeah, little less conversation, a little more action. Yeah, I think we're gonna. I was actually gonna read the segment on the mirror stage, but talking for 34 minutes, I think we're gonna take a break and we're gonna continue with the mirror stage after the break. Colleagues, thank you so much for your questions, comments. Keep them coming. The playlist for this reading of Lacan is somewhere in the description, so feel free to check it out. Feel free to look around the channel if you want, if Lacan is not your thing. Nikolai, special thanks and special award for showing up in the early morning. And until next time, stay safe and take care. Let's do a Buddhist bell, or tono switchy. Just as an outro. Take care, colleagues. Take care.